Most people never recognize this truth, not because it is hidden, but because avoidants become incredibly good at pretending it is not there. Today, I want to explore why avoidants often experience an emotional breakdown after an empath finally stops reaching out. Ironically, the moment they believe they have gained control is often the exact moment their inner world quietly begins to fall apart. Avoidants and empaths are emotional opposites. One naturally feels everything with great intensity, while the other survives by burying emotions as deeply as possible. One moves toward connection, while the other steps away to protect themselves. In the beginning, this difference can feel comforting, even balanced. But over time, that balance slowly turns into emotional tension. The empath continues to give, understand, forgive, and love, despite the walls the avoidant keeps building. Meanwhile, the avoidant withdraws, resists closeness, hides their feelings, and creates distance whenever emotions become too intense. The turning point comes when the empath finally stops pouring emotional energy into the relationship. Everything the avoidant believed they had under control was actually being supported by a pattern they never fully recognized. Avoidants are not really escaping relationships. They are escaping emotions. The reason they could keep running without completely falling apart was because the empath was always there to soften the impact. The empath's patience, kindness, compassion, and emotional dedication acted like a cushion, protecting the avoidant from experiencing the true consequences of their emotional distance. As long as the empath continued giving, the avoidant never had to face the emptiness they carried inside. They could avoid confronting their fears, unresolved pain, emotional blind spots, and the wounds they had buried beneath years of emotional protection. Whether they admit it or not, an empath's emotional presence often becomes something the avoidant quietly depends on. It gives them reassurance without requiring vulnerability. It lets them feel valued without asking them to fully open their heart. It allows them to feel emotionally significant without matching the same level of emotional investment. The empath offered far more than love. They created a sense of safety through understanding, forgiveness, consistency, and unwavering support. Over time, the avoidant started believing this would never change. They assumed the empath would always come back, always understand, and always keep the connection alive, no matter how many times they pulled away. Then, everything shifts. The empath becomes quiet, not out of anger, not to punish, not to manipulate. The silence comes from pure emotional exhaustion. It quietly says, "I can't carry this relationship alone anymore." At first, the avoidant barely notices. They assume it is temporary. They expect the empath to return just like before. They believe the emotional connection will restart on its own. But as the silence continues, something unfamiliar begins to grow inside them. They feel unsettled. The emotional stability they unknowingly relied on starts disappearing. The internal balance that had quietly depended on the empath's presence begins to weaken. That is where the real collapse starts. Not in public, but deep within. Many avoidants believe emotional distance is their greatest strength. Pulling away feels like power. Suppressing emotions feels like safety. Staying emotionally unavailable feels like control. But once the empath becomes silent, that sense of safety slowly transforms into loneliness. Distance becomes emptiness. The emotional walls that once protected them begin trapping them instead. For the first time, they no longer have the empath's emotional support helping them avoid what lies beneath. The empath's love is no longer calming their fears. Their patience no longer softens the avoidant's coldness. Their effort no longer fills the emotional spaces the avoidant refused to acknowledge. Now they are left alone with everything they spent years avoiding. Their insecurities, low self-worth, emotional hunger, fear of intimacy, fear of abandonment, and unresolved pain. All the feelings they pushed aside in the name of independence finally rise to the surface, leaving them with nowhere to hide. Their emotional armor slowly begins to crack beneath the weight of everything they never allowed themselves to process. This breakdown rarely happens dramatically. It unfolds in complete silence. They begin to notice the absence of the empath's warmth. They miss the emotional closeness they once believed was overwhelming. They find themselves longing for a connection they convinced themselves they never truly needed. Regret starts appearing because silence forces them to face truths they spent years avoiding. They believed the empath's love would last forever, but it didn't. They believed they controlled the relationship, but they never really did. They believed they could continue pulling away without consequences, only to discover the cost when the connection finally disappears. The avoidance collapse is not simply about losing the empath. It happens because they are finally forced to face themselves without the emotional support that quietly held everything together. The silence they once used as protection becomes a mirror they cannot escape. Eventually, they realize the empath's emotional energy was never the problem. It was the foundation that kept the relationship alive. Without it, they finally experience the full emotional weight of everything they pushed away. What truly falls apart is not only the relationship, but the invisible emotional structure the empath had been maintaining all along. They lose the feeling of being valued, wanted, emotionally grounded, and connected without having to do the difficult inner work themselves. When the empath chooses silence, the avoidant's inner world begins to shift because, for the first time, they must experience every emotion they spent their life trying to avoid. Avoidants often mistake silence for strength until they are faced with someone else's silence. For them, silence has always been a shield, a place to hide, regain control, and protect themselves whenever emotions become too intense. They retreat into silence the same way others seek comfort, believing it will keep them safe, until one day they discover that silence can also become the loudest reminder of everything they never allowed themselves to feel. For an avoidant, silence is rarely meant as punishment. It is their survival strategy. They use it to calm an overwhelmed nervous system, step away from emotions they cannot process, and avoid the vulnerability that genuine intimacy requires. In their mind, silence represents control. It allows them to manage their feelings, dictate the pace of the relationship, and avoid the discomfort that comes with emotional closeness. For a long time, this pattern seems to work because the empath keeps filling the empty space. Whenever the avoidant pulls away, the empath reaches forward with reassurance, patience, kindness, and understanding. Every time silence appears, the empath responds with love instead of distance. Because of this, the avoidant begins believing their silence carries no consequences. They assume the relationship will always survive because the empath will always be willing to repair what they leave behind. Then something unexpected happens. The empath becomes silent too. Not because they stopped caring, not because they want revenge. They simply reach the point where they have nothing left to give. Empaths do not become quiet easily. Their silence comes after countless attempts to communicate, after feeling unheard for too long, and after realizing that loving someone should not mean constantly losing themselves. The moment the empath falls silent, everything the avoidant believed about strength begins to unravel. Silence no longer feels comforting. It feels unsettling. What once gave them a sense of control now feels like losing something precious. The quiet becomes heavy, pressing against them in ways they never expected. That silence carries a message. It says, "I'm no longer chasing." It says, "I've given everything I had." It says, "This distance belongs to me now." In that moment, the avoidant starts seeing a truth they spent years avoiding. Their silence was never proof of emotional strength. It was fear hiding behind the appearance of control. They depended on the empath's willingness to keep trying, to keep forgiving, and to keep carrying the emotional weight of the relationship. Now there is no emotional cushion left. Instead, their silence becomes a mirror, reflecting the emptiness they have worked so hard to ignore. The empath's quiet reveals something painful. The avoidant never truly mastered emotional distance. They relied on someone else to close the gap they kept creating. Without the empath filling the silence with affection, reassurance, warmth, and love, they are finally left alone with themselves. Feelings they spent years avoiding begin to surface: loneliness, insecurity, longing, regret, and grief. The silence grows louder than any argument because this time they are not the one choosing it. They could always control their own withdrawal, but they cannot control someone else's decision to walk away emotionally. That loss of control awakens one of their deepest fears: losing someone who mattered far more than they ever admitted. For years, they believed silence made them powerful. But the empath's silence exposes a different reality. Real strength belonged to the person who continued loving, communicating, forgiving, and showing up despite the emotional distance. True courage was found in vulnerability, not avoidance. Once the empath stops reaching, the avoidant is forced to accept something difficult. Their silence never protected the relationship. Little by little, it damaged the very connection they wanted to keep. The shield they depended on becomes the thing that finally breaks through their emotional defenses. When the empath grows quiet, the avoidant discovers that silence is not power when it comes from the person who loved them most. It feels like loss, and this time, it is their loss to carry. The empath's silence creates a space the avoidant has spent a lifetime avoiding: their own inner world. Many avoidants build their emotional identity around escaping discomfort. They cope by shutting down, withdrawing, numbing themselves, and disconnecting whenever feelings become overwhelming. These habits are not random. They often begin in childhood, shaped by painful experiences that were never fully healed. Over time, those defenses become emotional armor. As long as the empath continues explaining, forgiving, loving, and holding the relationship together, the avoidant never has to look inward. They can avoid examining their fears, insecurities, and unresolved pain. They can justify their behavior, shift responsibility, or convince themselves that emotional distance is simply who they are. But when the empath becomes silent, there is nowhere left to hide. The emotional noise disappears. There is no comforting voice, no reassurance, no gentle presence smoothing over the damage created by withdrawal. The compassion, patience, and understanding that once held everything together are suddenly gone. Without that emotional support, the avoidant is pushed into the confrontation they feared most, a confrontation with themselves. They begin facing the fears they buried, the insecurities they denied, the old wounds they never healed, and the painful realization that they are not nearly as emotionally detached as they pretended to be. In many ways, avoidants fear their own inner world more than they fear losing a relationship. That fear explains why they pull away whenever emotions become real. Looking inward means confronting the younger parts of themselves that never felt safe, worthy, accepted, or loved. It means facing beliefs that vulnerability leads to pain, closeness ends in rejection, and intimacy is dangerous. As long as the empath remained present with warmth, patience, and understanding, those fears stayed hidden. The empath unknowingly became a shield protecting the avoidant from themselves. But genuine silence exposes everything. It shines light into the emptiness they worked so hard to ignore. It forces them to experience emotions they postponed for years: fear, loneliness, guilt, longing, regret, confusion, abandonment, and unresolved pain begin rising all at once because they never learned how to process emotions in healthy ways. The empath had quietly been providing emotional balance, helping stabilize the relationship without even realizing it. Once that presence disappears, the avoidant is left struggling with emotions they no longer know how to escape. Silence becomes a mirror. It reflects the distance they created, the coldness they offered, and the pain their actions caused. Most painfully, it reflects the truth that they pushed away someone who genuinely understood, accepted, and loved them. That realization often hurts more than they expected. Avoidants may hide their emotions well, but those emotions frequently arrive later, growing stronger with time. As the empath's silence continues, the avoidant's usual coping strategies begin to fail. Ignoring the problem no longer eases the pain. Distractions lose their effectiveness. Excuses no longer feel believable. They cannot claim they need space because the space now feels unbearably empty. They cannot celebrate independence because it suddenly feels indistinguishable from abandonment. Eventually, they realize they were never truly running from the empath. They were running from their own vulnerability. The silence exposes the emotional immaturity hidden beneath their calm exterior. It reveals the price of choosing fear over connection. It shows them how deeply they actually cared, how meaningful the relationship truly was, and how their avoidance slowly damaged the very love they secretly wanted but never learned how to receive. This is where the real emotional collapse begins, not through dramatic arguments or emotional outbursts, but in quiet moments alone with their thoughts, regrets, fears, guilt, and unmet emotional needs. For someone who spent years avoiding emotional truth, this inner confrontation feels like an earthquake shaking everything they believed about themselves. Only then do they recognize that the empath's love had quietly become the emotional anchor keeping them steady. Now that anchor is gone, leaving them drifting through emotions they can no longer avoid. That is why the empath's silence becomes such a powerful turning point. It does more than remove the empath's voice. It removes every excuse the avoidant relied upon. And once those excuses disappear, they are left facing the one person they have spent their entire life trying to avoid: themselves. The avoidant usually expects to be pursued. What they rarely expect is peace. And it is that calm, peaceful silence that quietly begins to break through the walls of their ego. Many avoidants grow used to a relationship pattern where the emotional balance always seems to work in their favor. They expect to be forgiven, reassured, comforted, and met with endless understanding. They unconsciously rely on the empath reaching out after every period of distance, trying to repair what has been damaged and bringing warmth back into the relationship. This isn't always intentional manipulation. Often, it is simply the pattern they have learned. They withdraw, someone follows. They become emotionally unavailable, someone works harder. Over time, this creates the illusion that they are in control. Being pursued allows them to feel important without risking vulnerability. So, whenever they create distance, they naturally assume the empath will return once again. They expect emotional conversations, heartfelt messages, explanations, apologies, or another attempt to rebuild the connection. In their mind, this cycle feels normal. They step back, the other person steps forward. That pattern convinces them they can keep love without fully participating in it. Then something happens they never prepared for. The empath stops chasing. There are no desperate messages, no endless explanations, no begging for answers, and no attempts to rescue the silence. Instead, there is quiet, not bitter silence, peaceful silence, calm acceptance. That silence carries no pressure. It is no longer focused on fixing the avoidant or saving the relationship. Instead, it quietly says, "I've accepted what is. You are not ready to meet me where I am." That realization is often far more unsettling than conflict itself. Arguments still mean there is emotional investment. Tears mean someone still cares. Questions mean someone is still trying. Pursuit means the connection still matters. But genuine peace sends a completely different message. It says the empath has stopped fighting a battle they cannot win alone. It says they are no longer trying to revive something that keeps being wounded. It says they have found emotional stability without depending on the avoidant. Most importantly, it says they no longer need the avoidant to feel whole. That quiet confidence can shake the avoidant more deeply than any emotional confrontation, because it challenges a hidden part of their identity. Their sense of value has often been reinforced by knowing someone kept choosing them despite the distance they created. As long as someone continued chasing them, they never had to face the frightening possibility that if no one pursued them, they might not feel chosen at all. Peace exposes something they spent years avoiding. It is not simply the loss of control. It is the realization that they have lost their place in someone's heart. That truth forces buried insecurities into the open. They begin questioning whether they were lovable without someone constantly carrying the relationship. The empath's silence reveals how much emotional meaning they had quietly depended upon. It shows the avoidant that what looked like strength was actually supported by another person's endless patience, compassion, and resilience. Without that emotional investment, the illusion of power begins to disappear. The ego starts cracking because there is nowhere left to hide, no emotional chaos to distract them, no conflict to blame, no pursuit to reassure them that everything will eventually return to normal. Only peace. And within that peace comes an uncomfortable realization. They are alone, not because the empath stopped loving them, but because they never learned how to remain emotionally present. That awareness marks the beginning of their internal collapse. Many avoidants spend years believing distance protects them. They convince themselves that pulling away keeps them safe, and that emotional shutdown preserves their independence. What they often fail to recognize is that the very distance they relied upon eventually becomes the thing that destroys the healthiest connection they ever had. When the empath becomes silent, the avoidant is finally confronted with reality. Silence is not revenge. It is simply the natural outcome of emotional neglect. Within that silence, they begin seeing everything they lost, everything they pushed away, and everything fear quietly stole from them. Many avoidants do not recognize the value of an empath until the relationship has already slipped away. They begin assuming the empath's loyalty is permanent. They mistake patience for endless tolerance and generosity for unconditional availability. They convince themselves the empath will always forgive, always understand, and always stay. But generosity has limits. Eventually, even the kindest heart reaches emotional exhaustion. When an empath finally lets go, it rarely happens overnight. It comes after countless moments of feeling unheard, overlooked, and emotionally alone. It happens only after every attempt to bridge the distance has been made. By the time they become silent, their quiet is no longer fueled by anger. It is acceptance. That silence becomes a mirror, reflecting everything the avoidant never wanted to acknowledge. It reveals the consequences of emotional withdrawal, the pain created by constant shutdowns, and the damage caused by living behind fear. The greatest illusion disappears. Without the empath reaching out anymore, the avoidant can no longer tell themselves that nobody ever truly loved them. They remember that someone actually did. Someone accepted them, believed in them, offered patience, kindness, and understanding without demanding perfection in return.